times.
Thank you, Ola. Their bios are available on our website, and you can also learn about our other scholars as well. So before I turn the presentation over to Derek to talk about the program, one last reminder, please send questions to all panelists via Q&A. More questions about the program and application are addressed in the presentation. If you're calling in via phone, please check one more time that you are on mute. Thank you, and here's Derek.
All right. Well, thanks, Rosa, for getting us kicked off. I will try to be as brief as possible so that we can spend most of our time with Ola and Garam, who will really be the stars of the show tonight. But I do want to start out with some basics about the program. So when we host sessions like this, we generally try to break them into 3 different pieces. I want to talk for just a couple of minutes about Stanford at the graduate level, because the strengths of the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program really are built on the strengths of the university. Then we can talk about the Knight Hennessy experience itself. We are very much a startup program, but you have the chance to hear from scholars in our 2 cohorts who are on campus. And then we'll talk about the admission process, and that's specifically what we look for, where we find it along the way, okay? But just to make sure that we're all in the right place, you know, if you're on this webinar tonight, that means that you are interested in graduate study, full-time residential graduate study at Stanford University. Any field of study that Stanford offers, you can be a Knight Hennessy Scholar. You should think of the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program as roughly 4 to 8 hours a week running alongside your graduate program. And if you join the community, you receive full funding for your graduate program. That means up to 3 years of funding from the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program. And then if your degree program is longer than 3 years, again, Garam is doing a PhD in neurosciences. Ola is earning a PhD in, what, psychology? No, management science, right? Yeah. Then you will take over funding from the department for the extended period of time there, right? So, so it is a really generous program. The Knight Hennessy Scholars Program will pay for your tuition directly and then give you a quarterly stipend that's intended to cover room and board, books and supplies. We give a contribution toward health insurance. You get an additional kind of stipend to cover your travel from home to Stanford and back at least once a year. Plus, there's an academic enrichment fund you can draw down to attend conferences or for other things related to your work. But really the key is the community of scholars you're joining. The best thing about being a Knight Hennessy Scholar is the other scholars, and then this amazing curriculum that you get a chance to go through with your fellow scholars. So I just wanted to make sure people were aware of that. The other thing I'll mention is that to be a Knight Hennessy Scholar, you must have received your first degree, your bachelor's degree, in 2014 or later. So that is to apply this year in 2020 to enroll in 2021. And we have more information about eligibility on our website and in the materials that you received, but I did want to lay that out quickly. So this is the main entrance to Stanford for those who haven't been to campus, called Palm Drive. And when you walk up Palm Drive, the entire campus opens up to you. There are 7 different schools. Internationally, you'd say 7 different faculties at Stanford. So 3 are professional faculties. Those are business, medicine, and law. And 4 are academic faculties. And those are earth sciences, education, engineering, and humanities and sciences. No matter what it is that you choose to study at Stanford, you know, the goal of a graduate education is building depth in a field, right? You're earning a doctoral degree. You're going to deepen and advance our understanding of your discipline. And that's really amazing. To be able to learn something deeply helps you to build confidence. It helps you to see new possibilities. And for a long time, we felt like that was enough, right? That you came to Stanford, you really excelled in whatever was your field, and you were well equipped to have an impact in the world. But now we think that in addition to building depth in your graduate program, you also have to learn to collaborate with other experts, people who are experts in different fields. If you think about some of the challenges we've been talking about that we're facing right now, whether that's, you know, systemic racism or issues related to justice, global pandemics, income inequality, these challenges don't line up with the artificial departments that universities have created. And so it's really important for you to be able to, yes, have your area of expertise, but also to work towards solutions with people who have different areas of expertise. At Stanford, we call these T-shaped students. So you have your area, but you can also collaborate. It means asking questions, knowing if you're getting the right answers, pushing people to think in different ways. And that's a hallmark of graduate education at Stanford. Third point, and then we'll get into the Knight Hennessy experience, is just when you think of Stanford, you probably think of Silicon Valley. Right? The two of us have grown up together. I always remind people Stanford was here first. So the Valley grew up around us. But we do have a common heritage. There's a common comfort with risk-taking and a real bias toward action, comfort with change and ambiguity. And I think those kinds of conditions allow innovation to flourish, but they also enable us to teach innovation directly. We often use a concept called design thinking, rooted in anthropology. It's basically about empathy, understanding people's needs as you create a product or a service or something that you create in general. So 3 quick points on Stanford. Now on the Knight Hennessy experience. We are, as I said earlier, a new program. Our first cohort of about 50 scholars, that's Garam's cohort, joined us in September of 2018. Our second cohort of about 70 scholars, Ola's cohort, joined us in 2019. Our third cohort will join us this coming September. We'll have around 75 students in that cohort. Our long-term goal is to have about 100 scholars per year. There are no quotas, there are no targets, there are no allocations, districts, regionally, by field of study, anything like that. So every cohort we build student by student, scholar by scholar. But we do think that the majority of our scholars will be international students in the long term, just looking at how talent is distributed around the world. So we want to tell you some of the things that we've done with the scholars in the last 18 months or so. I'd really put them into 3 major areas. One is the community of scholars. The second is the facility where a lot of our activities take place. And then the third is the leadership curriculum that scholars get a chance to participate in. Okay. So in terms of community, I want to ask our scholars to chime in here. I'm always hearing the best thing about being a Knight Hennessy Scholar is the other scholars. Would you tell us a bit about the community, whether that's deep dives or Friendsgiving? I mean, some of the things you see up here on the screen or other things that you believe are central to understanding the Knight Hennessy community?
I'd be happy to start. So there are structured ways that the program provides for us to build community, but there are also many just ad hoc scholar-driven ways to build community. So as Derek mentioned, community is really the best part of Knight Hennessy. So to me, the pillars of Knight Hennessy are humility and kindness and just caring about others. I think a cohort of 50 to 100 people is a lot. In retrospect, it really is not. You really do have an opportunity to get to know every single scholar and staff member we're just a giant family. So I can actually start with what you see in the photos. So in the left is our annual Friendsgiving, yeah. So it's, around Thanksgiving time, Americans celebrate Thanksgiving, and it's just a big dinner where we just get to all convene as a family and just have a time to bond and really share Thanksgiving. What you see in the very middle is actually, that was actually before the program even started, but people who were on campus getting together and getting a meal together. What you see on the bottom, we have these weekly lunches or breakfasts. So for each cohort, or maybe sometimes they're joined. So you have an opportunity to not only get to interact with the other scholars every week, but often they're structured so that you have something, a skill you're honing while you're, dining with your fellow scholars. So for instance, one of the skills we learn is storytelling. So we have a couple faculty members from the Department of Drama come and join us and teach us storytelling skills so that we can be better speakers in the long term. So those are just a few of the examples. I don't want to take all the time, but if Ola wants to add anything.
Yes, I think, as Graham said, the community is really, really one of the most important aspects of the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program. A lot of these programs revolve around interacting with people, not just within your cohort, also across cohorts, and developing skills that would help, hopefully, as we become future leaders. In addition to some of the programs that she's talked about, there are also outdoor activities. So going, for example, to other countries, to other cities to learn and use some of the things you've learned in a classroom, like storytelling skills or collaborative problem-solving skills, to explore real-world problems. And for me, those have been like the highlight of my experience at Knight Hennessy so far.
And we will get to hear more about the storytelling workshops and the retreats as we get into the curriculum itself. I wondered, so one thing that's not on the slide here is the deep dives. And we hear so much about them. We don't want you to violate confidences, but can you tell the folks who are listening, like, what is a deep dive, what actually happens, and why are they important in terms of building community?
So I can elaborate a little bit on this. So one of the things we have a chance to do is if a scholar or a group of scholars have a great idea, they can propose it and get funding from the program to host the event. So a deep dive is something that a couple of the scholars in the first cohort came up with, where all of us were so interested in getting to know each scholar because every scholar is just such an amazing human. And so what we decided to do, in addition to having weekly coffee chats where you're randomly paired with a person by a bot on an app, and people would just meet up and get to know each other that way. But we also wanted to really dig deep into the private, personal, how did you get to this stage and what are your dreams and goals? And so what we ended up doing was having about a 1.5 to 2 hour meeting every couple weeks where one scholar would be interviewed by another scholar. And so it was kind of a safe space where people got to open up about their story. So those are just a couple of the ways that we've gotten to know the other scholars.
Thanks for that. And these events, you can see the pictures here, and the deep dives take place in our, sorry, my cursor's a little bit off today, in our facility, which is called Denning House. Denning House is not a residence, but it is a home away from home for all of our scholars, in a central location on campus. Could you guys tell us what is Denning House? Why does it matter in your community and to you as scholars? Other than we have kombucha and cold brew coffee on tap, which are definitely key.
Yeah. So for me, Denning House is a place that it's like my second home in Stanford, besides my current apartment. It's a place that I feel like I can go and just see other scholars and just catch up with them. Also have a lot of like instantaneous conversations and talking about various issues. Or sometimes just catch up about their lives. Also like get a cup of kombucha or some of the snacks as well. Or listen to maybe Garam playing the piano, or there's so many things that go on at Denning House. Sometimes it's also a place where we have a number of events as well, and so sign up for these events and we attend. We listen to a lot of awesome speakers talk, get to ask them questions, and for me, as I said, I just think of it as my second home here at Stanford.
So the only thing I have to add to that is, in addition to it being, where most of our events are held, it's really, the reason it's really like a home is that anytime you walk inside, whoever's inside is your family and friend. So every single person in the building generally because they're just another scholar. And what happens a lot of times is, you see in the bottom right-hand photo that people are doing work, but you also see that people are interacting, and that's because it's just a space where spontaneous conversations happen all the time. And a lot of times you end up walking into a very late night conversation about some political issue or something, or a scholar teaching another scholar about their expertise. So it's really the technical term would be a place for serendipitous or planned serendipitous encounters. So it really is just a space for people to gather and, ideate, but also just get to know each other.
Love it. And it's designed to feel like a treehouse in the woods.
And it really does.
Yeah. And then that brings us to the curriculum. The curriculum for the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program is called the King Global Leadership Program, and really has three major aims. The first is to help you broaden your knowledge, expanding knowledge beyond what you're getting in your graduate program. The second is to build skills, skills that will be important during your time as a scholar and as a student, but also in life once you've graduated. And third, strengthening character, on the assumption that by the time you get to Stanford, your character is fairly well formed, but we can help you to strengthen it by coming to learn more about yourself, by seeing examples of people who've been through times of crisis or challenge. So on that first point, the notion of broadening horizons, expanding your knowledge, we offer seminars each quarter, usually 2 or 3 seminars each quarter. The ones at the top are some of the specialized seminars, and the larger images are from our session called Frontiers of Knowledge, where we bring in university faculty to do kind of one-time talks on their areas. Could I ask our scholars to tell us some of your favorite seminars you've attended?
For me, one of my favorites was one on sustainability, led by Professor Pamela Matson. This was in the fall quarter, and it focused on thinking about sustainability as a very complex problem, and one that requires also like interdisciplinary thinking skills. And I, as a person, as a researcher, and in my personal life, I try to think a lot about sustainability. And so it was a very, very useful seminar for me to not just like listen and hear from the professor, but also from other scholars as well, and discuss several issues around sustainability.
If I could mention some of the seminars I've loved the most. So what you see on the screen on the left is Al Roth, who is a former Nobel Prize winning economist. And on the right is Mike McFall, who was a former US ambassador to Russia under the Obama administration. And actually, it's Fei Li in the middle, who is an AI expert, and she leads the Human-Centered AI Initiative at Stanford. But all of these people, my area is neuroscience, and these are all areas that are completely out of my, knowledge field. And so, to me, seeing experts from other fields talk about their work has been just very eye-opening. And, obviously not all seminars are so out of the reach, but I think just becoming familiar with what issues are really important around the world and what other experts are thinking about has been a really great learning experience for me. In terms of, during this coronavirus epidemic, this quarter, everything has moved online, and in some ways you would expect that we've lost the dining house space and we have to move to online interactions, but actually the program has been very quick to adapt. So one seminar that was offered this quarter was called Leadership in Turbulent Times, and what happened was actually 4 scholars would team up and teach it a different topic every week, but each week was about a turbulent time and 1 or 2 leaders who were very crucial in leading a very difficult time, all the people through that time. And so we, discussed a historical example every single week. And that was a very meaningful and very great learning experience for me. And Ola was one of the people who volunteered to teach one of the seminars. So yeah, it was really wonderful.
Yeah, I love that seminar as well.
And that Leadership in Turbulent Times was actually, created directly due to the pandemic as a chance of giving scholars exposure to previous kind of similar scale incidents. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag in my slides here. So continuing the theme of broadening, we try to bring in a series of authors and artists throughout the academic year to share their insights with you. So you can see here on the screen some examples of folks who've been in to visit. I'll ask our scholars to help us. Is there anyone here, whether it's Erin Gruelle on the left about her Freedom Writer's Diary, or the Lord John Brown, CEO of BP, or Condi Rice, the former Secretary of State? And oh, who's that sitting next to Condi?
Yeah, Karen, do you want to start first?
No, I think you should start because your photo, you are the main person in that photo with Condi.
Yes. So well, Condoleezza Rice, we had to read a book, the democracy book, and then she came and she gave a talk, and we got the opportunity to ask her questions and engage with her, not just on the book but also in general. And for me, it was really amazing to be in the same space with Condoleezza Rice, who as a child I only got to see on TV. And also not just read a book, but also like engage with her as well. And so I was really excited to take that picture, and I showed it to all my family, and it's a very big deal for me. Also, there are other people as well, like and Aaron Cornwell, who wrote the Freedom Writer's Diary, also came, and we had to watch a documentary, and then also like had the opportunity to sit with her like in a roundtable format, and just ask questions. And this like that particular session for me was also one of my most memorable experiences in the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program, because we the combination of both like the documentary, the video that we saw, as well as the question and answering session was very engaging and moving.
Yeah, and just something I want to point out is, I mean, you can see in the photos how intimate these spaces are. So, Stanford gets a lot of really famous, prominent speakers, but it's not every day that you get to interact so closely and have such an open opportunity to ask questions and have more intimate conversations. So a couple other people I just want to point out, in the top on the very left is Alison Hobbs, who wrote a book called A Chosen Exile, and she is the director of, I believe, the history program here. And her book was about racial passing, so she spoke about her book and her experiences, and so that was a very eye-opening experience. I mean, systemic racism and people feeling like they can't be open about some aspect of their identity is an issue that continues to be pervasive throughout society today, obviously. So, that was really wonderful. On the very right is Lucy Kalanithi. You may recognize the book When Breath Becomes Air. It was a Stanford neurosurgeon who passed away too young, but he was a very beautiful writer, and he spoke about death and his life. And Lucy Kalanithi, who was married to Paul Kalanithi, came, and she was actually the very first speaker that came on day one for the very first cohort. So that was a very emotional and moving experience. So I want to talk about every single person on this page, but I will save you from that. But those are just a couple examples of the very meaningful experiences I've had, been fortunate enough to have with these speakers.
And continuing that theme, we have the arts physically built into Denning House, but also built into the program. So the first thing you see as you walk up the boardwalk toward Denning House is this beautiful bronze sculpture, Motsna. And this is the artist, Ursula von Reitingsbarg. Trevor Paglen, just below her on the left, did the piece Matterhorn. That's all about kind of technology and humanity. What's the difference between a computer that can recognize an image and a person who can understand it? Or Tomás Saraceno, who did the beautiful kind of reflective piece, an artist from Argentina. His work all relates to environment and society. And then Nick Cave, here the center image, and his work just beneath him is called Arm Piece. We acquired it about a year ago. Relates to social justice, gun violence, violence more generally, especially in the African-American community. And so we're excited that Nick Cave will come in and talk with the scholars in the next academic year. Gaurav, did you get a chance to attend when Ursula did her talks for your cohort in your first year?
Yeah, I went to Ursula and Trevor. So basically, I just want to point out, I basically go to every single event that Knight Hennessy offers because because I just want to say, if one of your questions, one of the common questions is, how much time do you dedicate to this program and how much am I obligated? It never feels like an obligation, because no matter how busy you are, the people that come are just so awesome, and these are just such amazing opportunities that you make time. I mean, it really is just amazing. It is truly an opportunity. So yeah, Ursula von Reitingsbarg came and talked about her motivation behind building that sculpture and what were kind of her thought processes. And it's it's just really wonderful to see how an artist thinks through the piece and how like the physical process, it's not just the artistic design process, but actually putting it together, you know, with these giant machines and pulleys is, you know, really amazing. And Trevor Paglen, you can see the images on the very bottom left, that it's a, you know, there's a little computer like AI kind of algorithm that's overlaid on top of images, and he actually has a artistic background, as in he used to be a composer. He was a composition major before, and so we spoke about the musical background, but you can see that he has kind of joined technology and art together. So, and that was a very intimate lunch, actually, where only, you know, less than 10 scholars attended. Sometimes it's smaller settings so that you can have an even more intimate conversation. So yeah, I mean, it's really wonderful to actually get to talk to the artists that, you know, have created these works of art that we see every day in the building.
I mean, Ken Burns, documentary filmmaker, came in and did a wonderful small group breakfast with the scholars. Trevor Paglen, if you're curious, he's a MacArthur Genius Award winner, and he did a wonderful talk at the Smithsonian Institution a couple of years back. So if you just Google him, Trevor Paglen, you can find it. It's a really wonderful talk about the intersection of kind of surveillance society and how he views that related to his art. So that second pillar that I spoke of, the pillar around skill building, you heard Gaurav a little bit earlier talk about these two faculty, Lisa Rowland here in the kind of teal sweater and Dan Klein in the gray t-shirt, two amazing faculty from the drama department who work with our scholars every week on storytelling. So I'll ask the scholars to mention that to you, but I'll point out just two other things. The top left is one of our workshops on etiquette, which I hope one of the scholars will share a little bit with you. And the bottom left is a workshop on listening skills. So a lot of leaders are really good at speaking, but not very good at listening. And it's actually more important to listen than to speak. So we want to give you opportunities to practice that active listening, and came up with a couple of great workshops on that. So scholars, tell us about these activities and experiences.
Ola, you want to start?
Yeah, so I can start out. So with Dan and Lisa, it's mostly about building storytelling skills. And in the fall quarter, we started by, you know, just these improv sessions where you have like a prompt, and then you're asked to like speak for a minute or two, like to reflect maybe some skills with respect to your story or the prompt. And sometimes we'll be given these prompts like a week before we meet, and we have this with our breakfast or lunch sessions every week. And this went on over the fall quarter as well as the winter quarter. But during the winter quarter, we sort of started working on actual like sharing experiences. So we had options to you know, either tell like a story from our personal lives, or to tell stories from maybe about our research. You know, basically puts into practice a lot of those prompts and skills about storytelling that we'd learned in the fall quarter. And for example, I got to like tell like my own story, or put the skills into practice like this quarter. And it was very, like, for me, it was very, very like useful to like get people's feedback, and also to put all the skills that I'd learned about storytelling into practice. There's also a Rob Capello on the bottom left, which is about listening. And I think so. I remember one particular session which was about like feeling, actually, like feel again and feel better. But I think his approach is to use music as a way to get you to develop, to understand like certain things, like listening better, or like understanding failure understanding failure, and also like identifying, not being relatable with like failure, and not letting failure let you down. And so for me, this was one very interesting session, because it was very, very nice to see how like things that we think about in our day-to-day lives were also paralleled in the course of like playing a musical piece, or, you know, listening to like music. And so yeah, those two sessions, the breakfast and lunch sessions we done on Lisa, as well as the listening sessions and the feel again sessions with Rob Capello, were very, very interesting, and they imbued in us very important skills.
The only really quick thing I'll add is that, you know, sometimes we have opportunities to very formally put these skills in very real life context. So it's not just with other scholars. So for instance, a scholar gets to always introduce or interview or moderate the discussion with every single one of our guests. So, you know, scholars take turns throughout the year talking. Oh, yes. So, you know, we have all these really wonderful guests come in. On the very right, you see Ellen Ochoa, who was the first Hispanic female astronaut to go to space. Really awesome. And our scholar, Madison Maloney, who is a Aero Astro master student. She got to interview her, and that was like her lifelong dream, which was really wonderful. In the middle, you see that our scholar is Sydney Frankenberg, who is an international policy master's. She got to introduce General Jim Mattis on the right, but another scholar, Matthew Colford, in my cohort, he got to actually moderate the discussion with Jim Mattis. So that was also really wonderful. Bottom right, Leah Matchett, political science PhD student. She got to interview oh my gosh,
Perry. Bill Perry.
Oh, yes, William Perry. William Perry. Yeah. So, and you know, so that, yeah, and he was former Secretary of Defense, I believe. So that was a really wonderful experience. Just to say, somebody I got to personally talk to was the mayor of Seoul, you see in the middle, bottom right hand. And we actually had him twice. We were lucky enough because this quarter, as I mentioned, we had oh, actually, I haven't mentioned this yet. So another series that came out spontaneously this quarter, almost also by another scholar's idea, was to you know, take this pandemic as an experience to see how leaders on the ground are actively working to combat you know, very real problems in real life. So Seoul happens to be have been exemplary in combating the pandemic. So in a city of over 10 million people, they have had 4 deaths total in this entire time. And, you know, they haven't had a shelter in place, and people have been walking, you know, so we had a lot to learn from there. So those are just a few examples. I mean, every single person on this screen, on the left is Michael Tubbs. He is mayor of, oh my gosh, Stockton, California. Really young, Stanford grad. And yeah, I mean, I won't go through every single person here, but you can see just really awesome opportunities to talk to and interview or moderate and practice public speaking as well.
Ola, anything you wanted to add?
No, I think Garam covered everything. I did enjoy our session with Mayor Park, so just wanted to add that there.
And I'll just add one last thing, which is the woman in the red, white, and blue sash, Michelle Bachelet, the former president of Chile, current United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. And Garam spoke about the kind of access that you have as a scholar. You know, she did a breakfast with maybe 10 students in the room, right? So a small room, a chance to have these really wonderful conversations. And we didn't mention this explicitly, but we follow something called Chatham House rules with our speakers, which means that what they say at Denning House, you know, stays at Denning House, and we don't, you know, tweet about it. So we can talk in general terms, but you don't actually, you know, quote it, giving them more freedom and flexibility. And so she had a wonderful talk about human rights and some of the challenges that she faces in her role. Now we augment these speakers. And the previous slide, those speakers come in roughly once each month. We have a different speaker. We augment those by bringing in visiting experts. We'll spend anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 months with our scholars. You know, just 3 quick people: Raymond Braun, one of the earliest employees at YouTube, a real expert in using social media for social good. Next to him, Kareth Foster, a comedian who travels around college campuses using humor as ways of bridging difficult topics. And up on top, Michael Spector, a journalist with The New Yorker who writes a lot about science, science policy, science communication, who's been with us since January. And wrote a wonderful piece on Dr. Anthony Fauci. If anyone reads The New Yorker, Dr. Anthony Fauci is leading the U.S. response to COVID-19 from the kind of infectious disease bureau with our National Institutes of Health. And so I'd love for our scholars to tell you, how do you engage with these visiting experts? What's the benefit? What do you take away from these encounters?
I can start. So we have opportunities to have meals with them in very small settings, and all of them give a seminar or a talk at some point so that it's more structured. But in addition, they hold office hours, so you can talk to them one-on-one and get advice, get their insights. So yeah, I mean, you have opportunities to just learn from them in a large setting like you see on the bottom right. But you also just get to, Michael Spector on the top right. He's just, hanging out with scholars after an event because he went to an event with us because he also thinks these programming opportunities are so cool. So, we just get to know them over time on a more consistent basis. And so that's also very wonderful.
Yes, and sometimes, like in Michael Spector's case, he led a seminar. So sometimes they also lead seminars, and then you can engage with them like in smaller groups as well on a specific theme.
Derek, you're muted.
Yeah, roughly 2 to 3 times each year, you get a chance to head away from campus to the beach in Carmel, to the foothills in the Santa Cruz Mountains for an offsite retreat with densely packed bonding activities with your fellow scholars. Now, we pointed out Ola on an earlier slide. Here's Gara in the sweater from our very first Impactathon. And so would you tell us what actually happens at these sessions? What are you doing? What's the goal?
Ola, you want to start?
Yes. So, for example, in the cohort retreat, in my case, in the 2019 cohort retreat, which was I think around in October, we went there, and then we had a number of activities. We had an activity around, I think, business chemistry, so just understanding like our relationships, our strengths and weaknesses, and how we could blend together. We had a number of activities also about team building, also understanding ourselves as well, and also we had also a lot of fun. Like we also played and like had games and talked together, and it was a really, really, really powerful bonding experience. You can see on the bottom left like people playing games, and then in the Impactathons, I attended one Impactathon like this year. And it was also very, very, very powerful, very impactful. We got to work together across teams for different disciplines, putting our minds together to focus on addressing problems. And in the case of the Impactathon that I attended this year, was focused around issues related to housing, and housing especially for couples, graduate students, or students with families and Stanford, and and how especially the issues that they face. And so we were able to really dive deep into these problems and also come up with very creative solutions, which we all presented, in addition to also bonding as well.
Yeah, so all I'll add is that, but kind of by demand by scholars, the Impactathons have really shifted to addressing not theoretical problems, but real world issues. It turns out the Knight Hennessy scholars are very, very action prone, and everybody wants to do good in the world immediately, even though these problems are so big, but everybody's just so eager. So on the top right is when we were given, a prompt to work on for the weekend in teams. And that was about, like teenagers spending too much screen time, for instance, and we were supposed to come up with creative ways that we could maybe combat that. But then later, scholars said, I want to do something that's more tangible, which is why Ola just mentioned, talking about the culture of care at Stanford specifically. So those are issues that would impact staff, employees, and graduate students right now. And so, and it's always guided by experts in that field. So, for instance, people from the department that deal with housing and benefits and all that kind of stuff were with us that weekend. Another example, which Derek will get into, is we get to go on a global trip every year, and so, or sorry, not every year. So you get to go on one global trip in your time as a scholar. and one domestic trip. Sorry, Derek, I'm stealing your thunder. But what you see on the right is that, you know, in our first spring break, the scholars had, you know, the trip was to Costa Rica. But it's not just a vacation. It's a wonderful bonding opportunity for sure. But we are with experts who have been doing something for a very long time. So, you know, the faculty member that Derek is pointing to there, Bill Durham, he has been going to Costa Rica for, I think, over 30 years. So working on environmental and local issues there. And so going back and forth between Stanford and Costa Rica yearly for, you know, many decades. And so the scholars got to see, you know, the ecotourism industry. How is it becoming carbon free by 2030, or, you know, some very ambitious goal? How does the education system work there? What about agriculture there? So they got to see problems on the ground for about a week in Costa Rica. And then our next Impactathon was with Bill Durham and other faculty members who gave us, okay, here are the problems that are on the ground. You guys witnessed it. How do we go about solving those problems? And so we spent the whole weekend, you know, in groups where we're, you know, across very different fields. And then came up with, we actually did a write-up that Impactathon, and that write-up was actually translated into Spanish so we could give it to the local people. So, you know, really aiming to impact the world in positive ways as soon as possible.
I love it. And Garam, you're not stealing the thunder. You are the thunder. So, you know, so we talked a bit about the global trip. We also hope that our scholars will be able to take advantage of a domestic trip as well. The domestic trip you can see here on the left was our first one to the Iowa Caucuses. For those who are not from the United States joining us today, the Iowa Caucuses are basically the first step in the presidential campaign every 4 years. So anyone who's running for their party's nomination goes to Iowa, where they have a series of small events with voters. So it's kind of the retail politics, a chance to really get up close and kind of touch the candidates. And so you can see the scholars had a chance to visit the Iowa Caucuses. Now we had other trips planned for this year. An international trip, one was going to Colombia, focused on alternative energy and sustainability, would have been led by a biologist from Stanford. Our second trip was going to go to Israel and Palestine, looking at why there hasn't been a peace agreement reached yet. And that would have been led by a political science faculty member from Stanford. In terms of domestic trips, we had one that is heartbreaking that we didn't get to do it because it was focused on civil rights, past, present, and future. Traveling through Georgia, meeting with Stacey Abrams, who was a Democratic candidate for governor there, meeting with Brian Stevenson in Alabama, the author of Just Mercy, leader of the Equal Justice Initiative, continuing up to Baltimore, working with an organization called Thread that helps to weave together the disparate parts of the community in Baltimore. And Thread would have been the subject of our next Impactathon. So we have postponed those trips to 2021, but look forward to giving scholars those chances. Now, Garam, Ola, were you guys signed up for any of the trips that were coming up this year?
Well, I was signed up for the Israel-Palestine trip led by Professor Judith Goldstein.
Could you tell us a bit about the briefing? Because I know you guys, the briefing book was like that thick. It was like 200 pages. Tell us a bit about what you were planning to do on that trip.
Yes, so we were going to explore, we're going to visit a number of places. We had a number, Professor Goldstein had a number of connections on the ground, and we're going to go to several areas in Israel and Palestine, and in particular talk to people, try to understand some of the issues on the ground and nature and the evolution of the conflict as well. And for us, I guess for me, this was primarily going to be, you know, just a time to listen and just to understand and pick up as much information as I can. And yeah, it's very sad that this didn't happen.
We will meet again. We fully expect these trips to be things that we can offer in the future, and wonderful chance for bonding. So that was an overview of the program, kind of what the scholars have to participate in when they are with us here at Stanford. To the extent that that's of interest to you, now I can tell you a bit about the selection process. So first, what do we look for as we select scholars? There are three major factors. And if you ask me later, how do I stand out? How do I make myself a strong applicant? I'm going to refer you back to this slide because these are literally the three sections of the evaluation form. So independence of thought, purposeful leadership, civic mindset. When we say independence of thought, we are not talking about the smartest person in the room. Although our scholars are brilliant and kind and wonderful, we're thinking more about curiosity, about students who come to Stanford full of original ideas, right? Who aren't waiting to be told what to do by a faculty member, but have issues you want to tackle, questions that you want to address, and you want to use the resources at Stanford to do that. We especially welcome students who might bring a contrarian viewpoint, a dissenting voice in a classroom, in a laboratory, in a small group, because we really believe that having varying perspectives enriches everyone in terms of the experience. The second piece, when we talk about purposeful leadership, we mean students who have big dreams, right? The kind of impact you want to play in the world, the kind of role you want to have. But we think about ambition for others as opposed to ambition for self. If you have big dreams, if there are things you want to achieve, then you realize you can't get there by yourself, right? These intractable problems in the world require people to collaborate to solve them. So you have to be able to influence outcomes, to build relationships, to motivate and inspire others. You also need the personal qualities, right? The resilience, the determination, the adaptability, persistence to keep pursuing your goals because you're going to encounter obstacles and failures along the way, and you have to keep pursuing them. And then this third element, when we think of the civic mindset, we're really thinking of scholars who are humble and kind, who will bring those qualities to our community, build a community where everyone is included, but not just people that you turn to when you have things to celebrate, but people you can go to when you need support. And probably most important, the people who hold you accountable, right? To be the best version of yourself, to follow your truest interests, to reach for those highest aspirations. And I think this is a community, and we talked about that kind of authenticity, that vulnerability. I think this is a community that will be with you for life. And those are the kind of three things that we're looking for. So then you might imagine, those are not necessarily the same things that make you a terrific PhD student in chemical engineering, or that make you a terrific Masters of Fine Arts student in documentary film. So as a result, there are two different applications if you want to be a Knight Hennessy Scholar. You have to submit two applications, one to the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program and one to your graduate program. The Knight Hennessy Scholars application is due on October 14th, regardless of the degree program you're pursuing. The degree program applications, however, are due at varying dates. This is on our website, it's in the application, but I just want to flag one thing. Sometimes there's an earlier deadline for your graduate program if you also are applying to be a Knight Hennessy Scholar. And the reason is that we can't select you as a scholar unless you're being admitted to a graduate program at Stanford. So we have to stay in very close touch with the graduate programs throughout the process, and that sometimes means the graduate program will ask you to apply a little early to allow for that kind of coordination. So the Knight Hennessy Scholars application is online. There's no application fee, but we ask you for a lot of biographical and demographic information. There typically is an application fee for your graduate program. We do not have the ability to waive those fees. We wish that we could. But if you have any trouble with those, you have to contact the graduate program directly. In addition to the online application, or within the online application, you'll submit a one-page resume. One page, which means you cannot list everything you've ever done in a one-page resume. So look at this as a way to frame your application. It's setting context. If this is the very first thing someone sees when they open your application to read it, how do you want to introduce yourself? How do you want to prepare us for what we're going to be learning more about through the rest of the application? We're going to ask you for transcripts, that is records of your academic work, undergraduate and graduate if you have that. When we look at your transcripts, we don't go course by course, grade by grade. We look more broadly. We're trying to understand trends and performance. Did you get off to a slow start in college? Did you have a slow finish to college? Did you take advantage of the opportunities that were presented to you? And we really try to meet you where you are. Now, in contrast, your academic program, yes, they can look at your transcript and say, you know, Gaurav, your transcript from Northwestern shows that these courses in, you know, neuroscience and psychology and biology translate into these courses in our neurosciences curriculum at Stanford. Your academic programs, your graduate programs have that ability. They will do that, but the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program will look more broadly. When it comes to test results, we simply follow the guidance of your graduate program. So on aptitude tests, some graduate programs require them. For example, all of our professional schools, right? To become a medical doctor, you have to take the MCAT, Medical College Admission Test. Other graduate programs do not accept scores at all. So I believe our philosophy department does not accept GRE scores at all. So even if you have them, you may not include them. So whatever you're doing for your graduate program, also do for the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program. There's an additional test of English proficiency. Now, if you have a degree from a university at which English is the sole and official language of instruction, you do not need an English test. Otherwise, you do. This requirement is not based on citizenship. It's not based on where you live or work. It's based on having a previous college degree, undergraduate degree, or graduate degree that is all in English instruction. If you need an English test, every Stanford program accepts the TOEFL, the test of English as a foreign language. Minimum score of 100 on the internet-based test or 600 on the paper-based test. If you're applying to the MBA program, but only the MBA program, they also accept the IELTS and the PTE, the International English Language Testing, it's either system or service, I think system, and the Pearson Test of English, with a minimum score of band 7 on the IELTS and 68 on the PTE. Okay. But here's where we get to really the core of the application, and I'll ask our scholars if they'll give you a little bit of insight, having gone through the process, on recommendation letters and essays. These are the stories. We talked before about storytelling, how central that is as a skill that you build in the program. It's also essential for you to be able to communicate your story and for others to tell us stories about you in the application. So the 2 reference letters that are required for the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program, 2 reference letters, may come from people who have taught you in classrooms or for whom you've been a research or course assistant, teaching assistant. If you're working, could come from a supervisor, a client, a customer, a board member, an investor, someone who's in a position to evaluate your work. You also might pick a coach of a sports team or a leader of a community activity. You have lots of choices. We're not concerned about the person's title. We're not concerned with whether they went to Stanford. We care about what the recommendation actually says. We need evidence, we need anecdotes, we need examples that help to bring you to life. And so you have to pick someone who knows you very well. In addition to the 2 letters for the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program, remember you also will have recommendation letters for your graduate program, typically between 3 and 5 letters for a graduate program. So we often get the question, is it all right to have the same person submit recommendation letters for both programs? Yes, that's fine. But remember, coming back to this idea that what makes you a great Knight Hennessy Scholar may not be the same thing that makes you a terrific PhD student in management science and engineering. Well, in that case, you want to ensure that the recommendations are addressed and tailored to each particular program's desires and interests. So scholars, tell us, how did you think about selecting your recommenders? Were there any challenges you ran into or any tips that you'd like to share with our attendees today?
I can start. So I in thinking about my recommenders, I looked at my program, and so I thought about the professor that I worked with in my master's program. So before Stanford, I was in a master's program, and so I basically reached out to my professors, my advisors, like the people in my lab, and they wrote letters for me. And I thought about this because I was writing to the department, so the department would ideally want to see like how good my research skills were and my academic ability in my degree program. And thinking about the Knight Hennessy's reference letters, because of the things that I knew that like Knight Hennessy emphasized in the website, I reached out to people who knew me in a different context, in a more personal context, and so I thought about people that I'd worked with back home in Nigeria. So I'm originally from Nigeria, and I had one of my undergrad advisors write one recommended reference letter for me, because he had known me not just in classroom but also like on outside the classroom, and we had known each other for a long time. So I thought he could speak to me as a person beyond my academic abilities. I also had a second letter writer who was an education advisor that I'd worked with in terms of mentoring other students, and so I asked her, and she offered to write a letter for me as well, and that's how I went about my reference letter writing.
I also chose people who were familiar with the technical side of my work, but also knew me in a more personal context, because remember that the criteria are, like independence of thought, civic mindsets, that kind of thing. So it goes beyond the technical success. And as Derek mentioned, these reference letters are very different from what's being written for your graduate application. So I thought about asking actually, some people who had written my academic references to also write my Knight Hennessy references. But what I ended up doing was, because I'm in the science field, I asked a collaborator of mine who knows, my work. So she's familiar with my work, but also knows me in a more personal context, and knows about, the volunteer work I've done, or knows me in other contexts outside of just science. And so I tried to pick people who could really speak on my behalf with very concrete anecdotes about, the qualities that Knight Hennessy asks for. And the biggest piece of advice I can probably give all of you is just go to the website. Everything that's there is there to help you. It is crystal clear, and it's exactly the criteria they send is exactly what they're looking for. And I'll leave the other advice for later.
Yeah, I think there's a part in the website that is like, I don't know, like advice recommenders or something. And because I remember like sharing a page on the website with my recommended writers, so that they just read it before they wrote the reference letters for the KH.
Yeah, actually, Rosa did away with that page for recommenders, but we put all the same information on a website. Don't worry. So there's just a recommendations page, and you can link people to that. And we do also give recommenders guidance in the email they receive. So the final piece of the written application, and then we have just about 3 more slides from there. Final piece of the written application will be the essays. Essays provide a chance for you to tell stories about yourself, in contrast to the recommendation letters, which are stories that others tell us about you. So we're going to have 1 long-form essay question and I think 4 short answer questions. The long-form essay question gives you a chance to do some structured reflection, right? To think carefully about the people and events and situations that have shaped you. And then we want you to tell us a story that only you can tell. And what makes it a story only you can tell is actually not that person or event or situation, but how it's affected your choices, your outlook, your perspective, those kinds of things. So that's the long form essay question. And then the short answers, some of them are very straightforward, right? Tell us your immediate and long-term intentions once you graduate from Stanford. Others may be a bit more whimsical, and we hope you have some fun with them. Tell us 8 improbable facts about yourself. So 8 things about you that are true but are unlikely. So again, I'll ask our scholars for any tips.
For me, the essay was an incredible opportunity to reflect. And I just want to say, after talking to so many current scholars and friends of mine who are at Stanford who applied for Knight Hennessy, but were not chosen, everybody unanimously said, I just felt like I knew myself better, and like I just became a better person while working on this application. So as Derek mentioned, there are many sections, and I like to think of it as not, this daunting amount of work I have to do, but rather it's an opportunity to express yourself and show many different sides of yourself that maybe one essay couldn't do, because you can't talk about everything about yourself. But the mixture of the fun and just the straightforward questions just gives you many opportunities. In terms of the improbable facts, that those are facts about you that others might find very surprising. So, I think talking to people around you, really reflecting on your past, how others view you, because maybe sometimes you don't realize some things that are very special, like stand out about yourself that others notice, So I think just how you would normally reflect, talk to your friends, family, but also think back on your own experiences and what really shaped you to be who you are today. And I think the biggest piece of advice I can give is there is no right answer. Like, I cannot say that enough times. There is no one type of scholar that makes you successful. What makes you successful is when you embrace everything that's made you, because that's what makes you special and unique. And every single Knight Hennessy Scholar is unique. So, I wouldn't say go on the website and look at what other people did and try to recapitulate that. Think back on your own experiences, what you're passionate about, and then write about those things, and it'll come through.
Yes, I agree with all Karen said. The only other thing I have to add is also just make sure that you answer the question. Yeah, I say that because I think when I was writing one of my essays, it got to a point where I was like, oh, I don't think I've really answered the question, even though I'd already written a lot of stuff down. And so this is something that may happen. Just make sure that you really answered what the prompt asks.
Yeah, well, that's an amazing point. And so let's recap all the things we talked about: the online application, the resume, the transcripts, the test scores, the recommendations, the essays. You have all those things as elements of the written application you submit by October 14th. Once you do that, then a new section appears in the application that says, hey, now you may submit a video, no more than 2 minutes in length. You record the video in the application just using your web camera, and then that's due by December 9th. So almost 2 months after the written application. The reason is that the written application is our primary method of learning about you. Once we've completed our review of the written application, that's when we start to reach out to the academic programs and get their feedback on how they view your candidacy for the PhD program in classics, how they think about you for the PhD program in cancer biology. And then we come back together with that feedback. Your academic programs will also send us your recommendation letters for the academic program. So most of the rest of the application for your graduate program, we don't think is going to add value to what we've already seen in the Knight Hennessy application. But the academic letters, the references actually do. So for the candidates that the academic programs tell us are their strongest ones, they also will send us your recommendation letters. And at that same point, then we'll look at this video. And we use all of that to come up with a short list of people we invite back to campus for what we call Immersion Weekend. And I'm going to ask our scholars if they'll, as a final piece here, and I know we're a bit over time, just tell you what Immersion Weekend is like. It's a couple of days slated for March of 2021. Stanford pays for your expenses. We pay for your airfare, hotels, meals, everything like that. And we want you to get a realistic preview of what it's like to be a scholar. And so, Gaurav, Ola, tell us a bit about Immersion Weekend.
It is truly a chance for you to get to know the program and the other current scholars as well as potential scholars, so people who would be in your cohort. You really get a taste. So you get to work with Lisa and Dan, who are the people from the Department of Drama that we mentioned earlier. But you also get to hear various faculty talk, plenty of opportunity to ask questions. You get to dine with the current scholars, and just really, it is really wanting to get to know you. And I just want to emphasize how much everybody is on your side. Everybody wants you to succeed. You have one interview with a panel of a few people who are all there to advocate for you. So really, it is not, as John Hennessy, who is the visionary of the program, what he likes to say is, this is not Hunger Games, and the program really means it. Everybody you meet should be really nice, and if they're not, you can go to the program and tell us. It is just a really wonderful experience, and to me, it was the biggest eye-opener because I didn't I had only heard about Stanford from afar, but I did not know, Immersion Weekend was a seller for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, same, same. Even starting from just getting to the hotel, and being welcome, and also meeting other people invited for Immersion Weekend. You learn a lot from Stanford and from other people. I made a lot of friends in Immersion Weekend who I'm still very much close to today.
Derek, you're muted.
Rosa, I know we're a bit over time. Do you want us to take a few questions here, or do you want to wrap up?
Yes, actually, I did send out a message. We are running a little over, but we will address a few questions that have been popping up. A lot of the questions that we've seen are about specific department requirements, and so we would encourage you to please visit the website of the department program that you're interested in applying to at Stanford. All of the requirements about test scores, recommendations, English test requirements are all there, and so please go to those program sites and get the information you need. One thing that has emerged, of course, is COVID-19, Derek. And so people are wondering, what is the impact on the admissions for people who are being affected by it, whether it be their grades, their test scores, or any job opportunities that might have arisen or not have fallen through because of COVID? What happens to their application? Will they be at a disadvantage because of those changes?
No, I mean, well, first, let's remember COVID-19 is probably for the first time that I can remember, it is global. Like, it is affecting everyone. And we obviously know it doesn't have the same effect on everyone, but every single institution is aware of it. Most institutions have taken some sort of action related to their own students. And so if anything, I think you should expect that you're applying, and certainly people are going to have a lot of empathy for the process that you've been through and for some of the opportunities that have been postponed or that may have disappeared when you were pursuing the things that really you matter, that you cared about and that mattered to you. So Stanford has a statement on our graduate admissions page, which is just gradadmissions with an S .stanford.edu that explains how we will continue to follow our holistic admission policies and look at the individual circumstances of every student. I think that's the most important thing we can promise. So we know it's a global condition, but we also know that the impact may be disparate on certain folks, and we will look at each individual student, each applicant, just as we do with everything else in the application as we're making decisions. And so some of the practical things, my understanding is that as of now, the GMAT has an online version, you can do it home. The GRE has an online version, you can do it home. The LSAT has an at-home version. I think the only one I've not heard that's adapted is the MCAT. And but I do understand that the AMCAS, American Medical College Admission Service System, has moved their deadline back at least a couple of weeks. So I think it's now due maybe October 15th, something like that. And then that means the Stanford supplement is also moved back a couple of weeks. So I think that's the way they're trying to accommodate that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Derek. And at this point, we do have a few more questions, but we would like to wind down because we want to be sensitive to time. But we did want to ask the scholars for a bit of advice. A lot of our audience members are wondering if you could give one piece of advice in preparation for the application, because a lot of them have just started looking at it. What helped you to get through the process? Gaurav, maybe we can start with you.
I think I already gave my my number one piece of advice, which is to just be yourself, because I think your experience is your biggest asset, and that really, really, we mean it so much when we say there is no one definition of success. Everybody is so special in their own way, and so I think just really self-reflecting and trying to portray your experiences in the best way possible is really the key to success.
Great, thank you. Ola, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Sure, I was going to say the same thing. Be introspective. Also, I think lots of people usually, like, I don't know, but as for me, like as a Nigerian, I like growing up, it was very easy for me to think, oh, maybe I shouldn't apply because I don't think I'm going to get in. And I think that more like people should, it may be normal for, depending on your background, to like have like imposter syndrome. I think, oh, let me not apply, or maybe I don't even get it. But like you should look beyond that. Don't be afraid to apply. Be yourself, and yeah, you never know what happens.
That's very
Actually, if I could add on what Ola just said, if you are even remotely considering applying, my advice is apply. There are so many of us who this wouldn't have been in our wildest dreams, probably. I actually almost didn't apply, and that would have been the biggest mistake of my life. I really think you just never know. What the program looks for may be so different from what, you know, traditional academic programs may look for. And you just don't know what opportunities you may be missing. It doesn't cost you anything except time. And that time, regardless of the outcome, will help you reflect on your experiences and really think about how to be a better person, really. So if you're thinking, just apply. You have nothing to lose.
The only rule of admission is that you can only admit the people who apply. And when you think back to the criteria for admission, when we talked about, you know, humility and kindness, it's precisely the person who is humble who says, oh, I'm not qualified for this. You're exactly the person who should be applying.
And on that note, we encourage you to start your application early to give yourself an ample time to prepare the best application you can. And I have one very important question that I think we need to address, and that came up specifically for you, Derek. Maritza.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maritza Santiago. I'm part of the admission team here at Knight Hennessy Scholar. And I just wanted to take a second to acknowledge Derek. This is his last official information session that he is doing for Knight Hennessy Scholars. He is moving on to be the Associate Dean at the Graduate School of Business. So I just want to take this moment from the entire team to say how much we appreciate you, how much we love you, and how much you put of yourself into Knight Hennessy Scholars. You're kind and humble, just like the scholars that we're looking for. We appreciate you. We thank you for all you do, for all you've done, and all you'll continue to do in your new role. We'll miss you very much. And there is just, I think, another person on the line who would like to say a couple words.
Hi, everyone. My name's Amy DeBose, and I'm the Associate Director for Community at Knight Hennessy Scholars. And I am honored to be here tonight for Derek's last information session on behalf of the team. And want to extend a heartfelt thanks to Derek for bringing our community together, that you've been hearing wonderful things from lovely Garam and wonderful Ola. Derek has been instrumental in creating our community, and his commitment to education, to leadership, and from the very beginning of the Knight Hennessy days, he has helped to create what you're learning about, or have spent the last hour learning about, and what you'll see on the website is much of Derek's fingerprints. And as one of the scholars once said about Denninghouse, but I think it can also apply to Derek and his wonderful diplomatic and very personable way of being a good citizen, is that he has helped create a home in the world and the world in a home. And thank you, Derek. We will miss you, but you're right across campus, so we'll come visit you.
I don't want to drag this
Go
on
ahead,
or anything.
Sure. Garam,
I think all the attendees are like, why are we here for this?
Thank you.
I just want to say to the attendees,
Derek.
yeah, to the attendees, the reason this is relevant is I just want to say what an honor it is to have heard the information session from Derek, as you can see. I mean, just this is, to me, this is a very informative, very, very representative information session. But also, Derek, thank you. It is such a shame that we cannot celebrate you in person. Yeah, we all love you so much. The program would not be, you know, what it is without you. And really, I think how Derek has really shaped the application, the questions, how the selection process is made, how he's going to select you guys for the next and future cohorts, how the program is going to do that. He has really set up the pillars. So Derek, you are such a special human and a gift to humanity. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And if you stayed on for this long, I'm really sorry. But thank you all, team. You all are wonderful. And I wish that half the things you said were true, but you know, everything that we do at Knight Hennessy is a team effort, and I'm really grateful to all of you. So thanks.
So it is my role to conclude, and I echo everything that has been said about Derek. I'm going to conclude our online information session. So please remember, you can find this information on our website at kh.stanford.edu. You can also apply directly on our website. It is now available. Thank you today to Garam and Olaf for being available, Emma Mertare, Santiago, and Deborah Casa-Stone for answering questions, and of course, Derek. Thank you for everything. You'll be receiving an event survey from us, so please respond as it helps us shape our future sessions. We do have more online sessions available, so please feel free to join us again. You will have to register separately in the upcoming events section on our website. Many apologies again for going over time, but we hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you again for calling in. Have a great day, be safe, and be healthy. Thank you.